Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a really fascinating journey into the life of Jeanne-Louise Calment.
That's right. Born in Arles, France, way back in 1875.
And she lived to an astonishing 122 years and 164 days, passing away there in 1997. We've got, well, quite a stack of sources here to really unpack her extraordinary story.
Yeah, and what's immediately striking about Jeanne Calment is what we might call the Calment paradox.
Paradox. How so?
Well, here's someone who, enjoyed things like significant amounts of chocolate, port wine, and even smoked cigarettes for a big part of her very long life.
Right, things you wouldn't normally associate with extreme longevity.
Exactly. Yet she holds the record as the most thoroughly documented long-lived person in history. It really makes you wonder about the factors that actually contribute to reaching such an extreme age.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we want to explore in this deep dive. We've gathered biographical accounts, scientific research, even stuff on the ongoing debate about her age.
All to understand what made her life so exceptional, and maybe what it tells us about the limits of human lifespan itself.
It's quite something to consider that Jeanne Calment is, well, the only person verified to have lived past 120, 121, and then hit 122.
Yeah, her case undeniably shaped how we think about how long a human life can actually last.
Looking at the bigger picture, I mean, her sheer existence kind of challenged the existing ideas about when human life expectancy typically ends. She was this remarkable outlier.
Made scientists really reconsider what biology might allow.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Jeanne was born into a pretty well-established middle-class family in Arles.
And here's an interesting little detail. It kind of speaks to her local roots. French wasn't actually her first language.
Oh, really?
No, she grew up speaking Occitan, which is a regional language from southern France.
Huh. That really grounds her in the history of that region.
Mm-hmm.
Her family history is also pretty interesting when you think about longevity.
Yeah, her father lived to almost 93. Her mother made it to 86.
And her older brother, Francois, reached 97. That definitely suggests, well, maybe a family tendency towards longer lifespans, a genetic thing.
It certainly points that way, though it's important to remember, even in families with longevity, things can happen. Jeanne had two other siblings who died in childhood.
Right, so beyond genetics, her early life circumstances were also quite unique for the time, weren't they?
Definitely. She had schooling until she was 16, which was pretty uncommon for women back then.
And then private lessons after that.
Yeah, in cooking, art, even dance, right up until she was about 20. It's hard not to see how that kind of upbringing, probably less financial worry, better resources.
How that could have positively influenced her overall health and well-being.
Exactly.
It certainly highlights a key insight. Longevity isn't just about habits later in life, is it? Early environment, resources, they seem to play a big role.
A factor sometimes overlooked, yeah, in the simple advice about diet and exercise.
And speaking of her early years, there's that incredible story about her meeting Vincent van Gogh. Around 1888, she would have been about 13.
Yeah, he apparently visited her family shop, and what's fascinating is her memory of him years later.
What did she say?
She recalled him as, dirty, badly dressed, and disagreeable, even ugly.
Really?
Yeah, and apparently more interested in drinking than painting, according to her. It's such a human, unfiltered glimpse of this, artistic giant through a teenager's eyes.
Wow. It reminds you, these historical figures were just, well, real people.
Mm-hmm. Interacting in everyday settings.
Okay, so fast forward a bit.
Mm.
At 21, Jeanne married Fernand Nicolas Calment, who was her double second cousin.
Yeah, their paternal grandfathers were brothers, and their paternal grandmothers were sisters.
Wow, that's close.
It is a striking illustration of, social norms in their community back then. And Fernand's wealth, that was important too.
How so?
Well, he owned a shop, a warehouse. It meant Jeanne never actually had to work.
Right. She even mentioned she never had to cook or shop, despite taking lessons.
Exactly. Points to a life with probably fewer of those daily stresses.
They had one daughter, Yvonne, born in 1898. But tragically, Yvonne passed away quite young in 1934.
Yeah, only 35 or 36, reportedly from pneumonia or pleurisy. And this loss, as we'll get into later, becomes a really central point in the whole debate about Jeanne's age.
Right. We'll definitely come back to that.
It's a deeply sad event, and it, underscores the higher mortality rates from infectious diseases back then, even for more privileged families.
So Yvonne's death meant Jeanne helped raise her grandson, Frédéric.
That's right, Frédéric Biot, born in 1926. But sadly, there was more tragedy. Jeanne's husband, Fernand, died in 1942.
And then Frederick.
He also died young in a car accident in the early 1960s. So by 1963, Jeanne had outlived her daughter, her husband, and her grandson, her entire immediate family.
It's just astonishing. The resilience needed to endure all that and still live for decades more. It makes you think about the psychology of it all.
It really does. Research increasingly points to psychological well-being, things like optimism, adaptability, playing a pretty big role in living a long life.
Maybe buffering the effects of stress.
Potentially, yeah. Buffering the physiological effects. We can't know her inner experience, obviously, but her continued engagement with life later on certainly hints at a remarkable ability to cope.
So, after her grandson died, she lived alone in her apartment in Arles from age 88.
Yes, until shortly before her 110th birthday in 1985. That's when she moved into the nursing home La Maison du Lac.
And what prompted the move? Was it health?
Apparently, it was frozen pipes in her apartment during a cold winter. Get this, she didn't use heating.
Seriously, at nearly 110.
Yeah, so frozen pipes, and she got some frostbite on her hands. That led to the move.
Wow, that detail about no heating, it's just a certain, I don't know, hardiness or just a different standard of comfort.
Could be. Her public profile really took off around 1988 when she was 113.
Ah, during the centenary of Van Gogh's visit to Arles.
Exactly. Her firsthand memories suddenly made her a media sensation. It's amazing she could still share those recollections so vividly.
It truly is. And then, of course, came the recognition, world's oldest living person.
And finally, in 1995, at age 120, officially the oldest person in history with a verified birthday. She totally surpassed all the previous records.
She became a local celebrity, didn't she? Her birthdays were big media events.
Yeah, and she seemed to genuinely enjoy them, even interacting with reporters.
That continued engagement, connecting with the world even in extreme old age. That seems important, too.
It could well be another contributing factor, suggesting a sustained, zest for life.
Jeanne Calment passed away on August 4th, 1997, in that same nursing home in Arles, verified age, 122 years, 164 days.
The cause of death was reported as, well, either unspecified or simply old age, senility.
Apparently, she was in pretty good general health just a month before, despite being nearly blind and deaf.
Yeah, it sounds like the decline was quite rapid in those very last weeks. She's buried back in Arles.
We even have a table summarizing all these key life events and her age. Looking at that timeline, it just really underscores the extraordinary length of her life.
And how much history she lived through.
Okay, so we've looked at the sort of foundations of her life. Now, let's get into how she actually lived those 122 years. The lifestyle details.
Right, this is where that Calment paradox really comes into focus. Let's start with diet and nutrition. Olive oil seems to be key.
Yeah, she attributed her longevity and good skin to using it liberally, right?
Yeah.
On food and even on her skin.
Exactly. Which, fits nicely with the whole Mediterranean diet idea, those healthy fats.
Definitely associated with lower risk of heart disease, other age-related stuff. But then, the chocolate.
Yes, the chocolate. Reports suggest she ate, significant amounts. Some sources even say up to 1 kilogram a week.
A kilo. That's a lot of chocolate.
Yeah.
Seems to fly in the face of typical dietary advice.
It certainly does. Now, it's possible that for her, maybe her metabolism, it didn't have the same negative impact, or, maybe the amount got a bit exaggerated over time, part of the legend.
Could be. And she enjoyed port wine, too.
Regularly, yeah. Especially after lunch at the residence. Again, moderate alcohol has been linked to some health benefits in some people, but it's complex.
Very complex. It varies so much person to person. Her daily meals sound fairly traditional for the region.
Pretty much. Coffee and biscotti for breakfast, bigger lunches, lighter dinners, always dessert, fruit salad.
And she preferred richer, spicier foods, not bland stuff.
Apparently so. Things like daub, that beef stew, not so much boiled fish. It's this mix, isn't it? Healthy elements, less healthy elements.
Makes it really hard to pin her longevity just on diet.
Exactly. It highlights that longevity probably isn't just about ticking off all the healthy eating boxes. So many other factors interacting.
Okay, what about physical activity? Because she was remarkably active for a very long time.
Oh, incredibly so. Fencing until 85.
85, wow.
Cycling until she was 100. Walking without a cane until 114. That's just truly incredible.
That sustained activity has to be a huge positive factor.
Muscle mass.
Heart health, bone density.
Definitely. Likely contributed significantly. Her mobility did decline, though, after she fractured her hip at nearly 115.
Yeah, that required surgery and a wheelchair, sadly.
But even before that, she'd recovered from other fractures, an ankle fracture in her, quote, retirement age, and a broken leg around age 100. And she walked again after that.
Just amazing resilience. And she enjoyed hunting.
Yeah, some accounts say she started around 20, others say maybe closer to 40. She even described herself as having a masculine nature.
Nicknamed Jeanne Calment.
Right, within her husband's all-male hunting club. That active outdoor life must have added to her, physical robustness.
And even in the nursing home, she kept doing exercises.
Daily chair exercises, yeah, arm and leg stretches. The staff noticed she was way more agile than much younger residents.
Really underscores that use it or lose it idea as we age. Okay, now let's turn to the more debated lifestyle choices. Smoking, for instance.
Ah, yes. The accounts of her smoking history are quite varied, aren't they?
Very. One version says she only became a regular smoker at a 112 in the nursing home.
While another calls her a voracious smoker when she arrived there.
But the most common story is she started at 21, right? Introduced by her husband.
That's the widely reported version. Smoked after meals, maybe one, maybe up to 6 cigarettes a day, depending on who you ask, and kept it up until she was about 117.
Smoking for nearly a century and still living to 122.
It's quite remarkable. It definitely challenges the simple cause and effect we often assume between smoking and lifespan.
Though maybe protective genetics played a role there.
Very possible. Most agree she stopped around 117, mainly because her eyesight was failing, making it hard to light up.
And on top of smoking, there was the regular port wine, other wine.
Again, not exactly textbook healthy living. Yet, there she was. It just brings us back to that complex interplay. Maybe the moderate alcohol had some benefits for her. Maybe her body was just exceptionally resilient.
What about her daily life structure, social context? Professionally, she was a housewife, never worked.
Right, due to her husband's wealth. Some researchers suggest that lack of work stress might have been a factor.
That makes sense. Chronic stress is definitely bad for health. Living without financial worries, career pressures could be a big advantage.
And her socioeconomic privilege from birth, as we mentioned, likely provided a higher quality of life overall. Better nutrition, less risk exposure.
Allowed her genetic potential to be fully expressed, maybe.
Possibly. She was also socially active, wasn't she? Hosting dances when younger, visiting neighbors in the nursing home.
Maintaining social connections, that seems vital.
Absolutely vital. Combats loneliness, depression. Huge protective factors as we age. Feeling connected, having purpose.
Her daily routine in the nursing home sounds quite structured, too.
Very. Wake up 6.45, prayer, exercises, wash up using olive oil, apparently. Breakfast, lunch with a cigarette and port.
Quite the routine.
Then a 2-hour nap, visiting others or listening to the radio, light dinner, evening music, last cigarette, bed at 10. Plus religious services.
That kind of structure, that rhythm could be really stabilizing in advanced age, couldn't it?
Yeah, provides security, maybe helps maintain cognitive function too, less decision fatigue.
Okay, so we've looked at how she lived. Now let's shift to the scientific perspectives on this extraordinary longevity. Despite her famous never been ill claim.
Right, that was likely a bit of an oversimplification or just reflected her generally feeling robust. The medical records do show some things.
Like what?
Incipient cataracts early on, migraines in her youth, those bone fractures later in life. She was even hospitalized at 111 for heart failure, treated with digoxin, and later developed arthropathy joint issues in her ankles, elbows, wrists. Treated with anti-inflammatories, x-rays showed osteoporosis and some osteoarthritis.
But she did avoid a lot of common illnesses.
Yes, things like German measles, chickenpox, UTIs, never had hypertension or diabetes. And crucially, her cognitive function held up remarkably well.
Until the very end, almost.
Pretty much. At 118, tests showed her verbal memory and language skills were like people decades younger. Relatively preserved frontal lobe functions, no sign of progressive neurological disease.
Wow.
Interestingly, they even observed some slight improvement in cognitive function over a 6-month period around then, though earlier tests at 114 did show some difficulty with numbers and recent memory.
Physically, she became quite small in her later years, right?
Yeah, ended up around 40 kilos, 137 centimeters tall. Vision and hearing declined significantly, but overall health seemed pretty stable until right near the end.
It's fascinating. Her case became a medical doctoral thesis subject when she was 114.
Really highlights the intense scientific interest, and as we said, she's widely seen as the best documented supercentenarian ever. The validation of her age was incredibly thorough.
Led by Jean-Marie Robin and Michel Allard.
Key figures, yes, working with INSERM researchers. It was a formal process, took a whole year, starting from her 120th birthday in 1995. The amount of evidence was exceptional.
Like the census records.
At least 14 population censuses, starting when she was just 1 year old. Plus birth, marriage, death certificates, parish records, notary records, meticulously checked.
And they interviewed her extensively, too.
Yes, asking very specific questions about her early life, names of teachers, servants, family members, places to make sure her memories matched the documented facts.
And her family's status helped find all that evidence.
Being part of the local Catholic bourgeoisie definitely made it easier to trace those consistent chains of documents. Because of all this, her case became a crucial benchmark. She'd already outlived hundreds of other verified supercentenarians.
So what are the leading scientific theories for how she lived to 122? Sounds like it's not just one thing.
No, definitely not. The current understanding is it's almost certainly a complex interplay of multiple factors. Genetics is seen as potentially very important.
Because her family also lived long lives.
That suggests a predisposition, yeah. And genetic analysis on Jeanne herself found a specific variant, the DR1 allele of the HLA system.
Which is linked to the immune system.
Exactly. It's found more often in centenarians, suggesting maybe a link between a robust immune system and exceptional longevity.
Interesting. So the thinking is, getting really old, like 110 plus era, might be more about good genes.
That's a strong hypothesis, whereas lifestyle might be more key for reaching, say, 85 or 90.
And her lifestyle, as we discussed, was contradictory.
Right. Olive oil, fruit, high activity, those are positives, lack of work stress maybe. But then the chocolate, the smoking, it complicates a purely healthy lifestyle picture.
No single magic bullet then. What about her environment?
Her privileged socioeconomic environment in southern France likely played a role. Better nutrition, fewer environmental risks, maybe better coping during epidemics. This privilege factor might have let her genetic potential shine.
And her psychological resilience seems huge, coping with all those losses.
Absolutely. That ability to cope with adversity, stay positive, stay connected, increasingly seen as a big factor in longevity.
And finally,
Luck.
you can't ignore chance. Yeah. Given how statistically improbable 122 is, even the researchers admit a significant chunk must be down to just sheer, extraordinary good luck.
Her age is such an extreme outlier.
It really is. Surpasses the next verified case by several years. That statistical rarity drives both the scientific interest and, well, the skepticism we need to talk about. Her life challenges our models of mortality.
So summing up the science, it's multifactorial. Genetics, lifestyle with complexities, environment, resilience, and chance all interacting.
Precisely. But the exact formula, still largely an enigma. We've got a table summarizing these factors, the evidence, the counterarguments, shows how multifaceted it is.
Okay, now let's tackle the controversy, because despite that intense validation in the 90s, her record age became seriously debated starting around 2018.
Yeah, mainly kicked off by Russian researchers. It's quite something. After all that work, a theory emerges questioning her very identity. What's the core of it?
It's called the identity swap hypothesis, proposed by a mathematician, Nikolai Zok, supported by gerontologist Valery Novoselov.
And the theory is?
That the real Jeanne Calment, born 1875, actually died back in 1934, maybe from TB. And to avoid hefty inheritance taxes, her daughter, Yvonne, born 1898, assumed her mother's identity.
Whoa, so the woman who died in 1997 would have been Yvonne at age 99.
That's the claim. It's an extraordinary claim.
How did they support it? Zok initially put it on ResearchGate, right? Then later some statistical analyses were published.
Yes, Bayesian analyses arguing the probability, but the evidence they present is acknowledged even by them as mostly circumstantial.
Okay, so what is this circumstantial evidence?
Well, one point is alleged physical discrepancies. They compare a 1930s ID card supposedly describing Jeanne in black eyes, specific height, forehead to her later appearance. They even say photos of Yvonne look more like the elderly Jeanne.
But the validators dispute that, citing aging variations, photo misidentification.
Exactly. Then there are alleged memory inconsistencies in Jeanne's interviews. Mixing up husband and father, details about servants fitting Yvonne's timeline better, vagueness about some events. What else? The destruction of documents. Jeanne asked a relative to burn some family photos and papers in 1994, just when the archives wanted them. Zak and Novoselov see that as suspicious, maybe hiding evidence.
Okay, that sounds potentially suspicious, yeah.
Then there's Yvonne's health, official cause of death. Pleurisy, sometimes linked to TB. They point to photos allegedly showing Yvonne at a Swiss TB sanatorium.
And the elderly Jeanne had signs of past lung issues.
Medical reports mention pleural sequelae, consistent with past TB. This seems to contradict the never been ill narrative.
Interesting. Anything else?
Social behavior questions. Why didn't Yvonne's husband remarry? Why did he live with his supposed mother-in-law? And finally, they lean heavily on the statistical argument. 122 is so improbable, maybe fraud is a more likely explanation.
It definitely weaves together a compelling story, even if it's circumstantial. But the original validators and other experts strongly refute it, right?
Oh, vehemently. Their counter-arguments are pretty strong, too. One key point is the specific knowledge test.
The details only the real Jeanne would
Oh,
know.
exactly. Robien and others stress she correctly named her childhood math teacher, piano teacher, a specific seamstress, her private school things Yvonne wouldn't know firsthand. And these were independently verified.
It seems like powerful evidence against a swap. What else?
The social implausibility. Maintaining that deception for over 60 years in a small town like Arles, it would require dozens of people, family, friends, neighbors, officials, doctors, priests, to be complicit or silent.
Seems incredibly difficult, yeah. The idea of Fernand Calment passing off his daughter as his wife.
They called it harebrained. Plus, Yvonne's 1934 funeral was public, announced in papers, big crowd attended, doesn't fit with this secret cover-up.
And all that original documentary evidence.
Still stands. The consistent chain of official records from 1875. Graphological analysis, too. Handwriting experts found signatures throughout her long life consistent with Jeanne's known signature and different from Yvonne's.
What about the photo discrepancies they raised?
The validators acknowledge comparing old photos is tricky, but they argue clear photos of Yvonne show a distinctly different face from the elderly Jeanne, and 1934 photos show Jeanne looking clearly older than her daughter.
So it sounds like the defense of the original validation is pretty robust.
It is. There's even a counter-investigation group that's compiled more evidence supporting it, details on Yvonne's illness, treatment, the public funeral. And statistically, while admitting 122 is rare, they argue their models show it's not impossible.
So where does the debate stand now? Still unresolved.
Pretty much. No universally accepted conclusion. The swap proponents admit their evidence is circumstantial. The majority of the scientific community involved in the validation feels the swap evidence is insufficient to overturn such a well-documented case.
It really comes down to that principle in science, doesn't it? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Exactly. And the identity swap is definitely an extraordinary claim. The burden of proof lies with those proposing it.
And while they've raised interesting points, the strength of the original documents, the specific memories, the social implausibility,
Leads most experts to believe the balance of evidence still heavily favors the original validation of Jeanne Calment.
is there any way to settle this definitively? Like DNA?
That would be the only way, really, comparing biological samples from Jeanne and Yvonne if they exist, or zygosity tests given the family relation. Exhumation has even been suggested.
Wow. But regardless of how it plays out, this controversy has impacted gerontology.
Oh, significantly. It's forced a reevaluation of age validation methods for supercentenarians. Need for rigorous, multi-source approaches, acknowledging potential errors or fraud.
And it affects the stats on human lifespan limits.
Directly. If Calment's record was invalidated, the observed maximum lifespan drops considerably. Could change interpretations of mortality patterns at extreme ages.
Okay, so wrapping this up, what's the main takeaway from our deep dive into Jeanne Calment?
Well, based on the most comprehensive evidence we have right now, Jean-Louis Calment still holds the record, 122 years, 164 days.
Likely due to a unique mix of factors.
Yeah. Genetic predisposition, beneficial lifestyle aspects like olive oil and activity, a privileged environment, incredible psychological resilience, and, a healthy dose of sheer luck.
The Calment paradox remains that mix of healthy and less healthy habits alongside incredible age.
It really underscores how complex and, frankly, still mysterious human longevity is. And while that identity swap controversy lingers,
Not fully accepted by most experts, but still out there.
right, it adds another layer of intrigue. The original validators largely stand by their findings, but without that definitive DNA proof, the debate isn't completely closed.
But her legacy is significant either way.
Absolutely. A crucial, if debated, data point for understanding aging limits. A continuing source of public fascination. A testament to resilience and the intricate factors shaping lifespan.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Was Jeanne Calment this truly unique biological outlier, pushing the known limits? Or does the ongoing controversy suggest those limits are maybe even more elusive than we think?
What other surprising factors might contribute to extreme longevity that we're only just starting to grasp?
It's a question that really invites us all to keep exploring the fascinating enigma of human aging. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.